Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wondered what in the world's going on with the world, according to the stars, then do we have the Daily Astro Alerts forecast show for you. Today I'll be talking with my all-time favorite astrologer, Dr. Michael Lennox, about what's coming up, what's in the stars, and even if we need to, duck and cover. So welcome back to the show, Michael. Are you ready to shine?
I am ready to shine. I'm already shining, but I'd love to share my shine with y'all and your shine.
So I can't believe I'm going to go here, so please forgive me. But before we dive right into things, wasn't 2022 supposed to be an easier year, Michael?
Yes, and technically it is in some ways, but here's and I said the right language when we were talking about this year, but I don't think I gave it enough emphasis. The fact that there are not these huge planetary transits does mean that the change and transformation that we're going through isn't directly connected to the world events the way they very much were in 2020 and in 2021, where there just was no disconnect between the challenge and suffering that comes when we are changing from the skin in, but the world was changing as well. It doesn't mean that the world is not still changing, because change is a constant. But from a perspective of astrology, because the outer and the social planets are, air quotes, quieter this year, the inner experiences governed by personal planet retrogrades, the double retrograde experience of Venus and Mercury simultaneously retrograde during the first few months of the year, eclipse seasons that are coming and will come twice this year, and all the rest of the retrogrades, including Mars at the end of the year, are and will be more impactful in an internal way that is much, much greater, because the outer planets aren't crashing with waves that we have to ride. So abstractly, I don't think that anyone's going to really get this who isn't an astrologer, because to you, it's just, this sucks. This is hard. I'm in pain. I'm growing. And it's like, yes, you are. And the astrology says that it's a greater emphasis on individual internal changes and a little bit less about how we are changing because the world is.
All right. I am going to somewhat take your word for it, because it sure does feel like not quite a duck and cover. It actually feels a little bit, and I am a I know this is all positive growth here for us, but there is an element of helplessness at this time where we're watching stuff and going, holy smokes. So if we look back at that's a technical term, if we look back at the last few months, can we see in hindsight what got us here?
Well, I mean, this speaks to the idea of individualized personal transformation and growth. What happened energetically was that we had a retrograding Venus who met up with Pluto, the planet of great change at the level of death and rebirth. And then at the same time, Mercury came back and hung out with Pluto. So both of those retrogrades made January, February, and certainly the first half of March wildly transformational at the personal and individual level. Now, last year when I was talking about these coming, I said things like, it's going to be crazy to have two retrogrades at the same time and they're connecting with Pluto. The words were accurate, Michael. The inhabitants of the words was a little less than the intensity that the actual process brought. I wouldn't have used different words last year. I think I just would have gotten more vociferous in my passion about just how transformative those few months could be. I will tell you personally, I was knocked on my ass with what was up for me.
I don't know if you want to share about that, but I mean, for ourselves going to the hospital to have our baby delivered in just a few weeks, we have been knocked on said bootius.
Many times. I will share this. Pluto and the two retrograding planets were in a trine, which is a harmonious geometry, with my Mercury. Mercury is everything to me because I am a voice. I am a speaker. I sing. I teach with my voice. I teach about the voice. And there have been these great external expansions this year from that transit. I got a new book deal. I'm writing my fourth book. I got asked to do a forward of a book that's coming out from a very high-level press. St. Lawrence is putting out an ancient dictionary from the 1800s, and I wrote a forward for that. And so the book deal and the forward was all coming at the same time as this transit. And I'll just tell you that the same extent to which my outside world was transforming, I got knocked on my butt about love, intimacy, and inner expansions due to relational stuff that came up that I did not see coming. And so the outer expansion was matched by an equally deep and powerful inner expansion. And I'll just say this, thank God I know how to do change and transformation, because I was able to use the energies and go to a deep place and come out the other side transformed. And I'm assuming, Michael, that you did too.
It has been a very grounding experience. So I'm looking at birthday, our coming of baby Hannah coming shortly to a theater near you. And I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like with all I've gone through, and I'm hoping that people listening are starting to feel this way as well, as we start to do more of the inner work because we're being drawn inward at this time, I feel like I'm not wishing anything but calm and easy. But there's a birth process taking place, and birth is never usually called calm and easy.
No, it's in fact quite a radical disruption, including being physically brutal to the experience of bringing a baby through.
Yes. I feel, though, that the more that the world will start to shake during this time, the more grounded, because of this year and the experiences started with me kissing an SUV or getting kissed by an SUV last fall on my bicycle, the more grounded I will be.
Well, I love that. I mean, that's certainly what's possible when we face the challenges and do the work, and we're talking in the month of April, right? So we're in an interesting month to talk about what's happening when baby Hannah comes in that's like June, right?
May, her revised date, because of the procedure that she went through to save her life, is approximately May 7th. I'm guessing it's going to be a little bit later, but it's approximately May 7th.
So April is the month where, the the predictions were all, it's the best month of the year. And in some ways, I'm going to stand by that. It is true that the energy of April is not only lighter than January, February, and March, lighter than May is going to be, because May is eclipse season, and that's always a bit of an amplified and challenging energy. We're also floating through, and I use that word specifically, we are floating through a moment where the planet Jupiter, that brings manifestation, abundance, prosperity, and good fortune, is aligning with the planet Neptune, that establishes our spiritual connection. And so nobody's listening to your show who hasn't seen a plethora of the memes out there that this is the most magical, the most abundant thing ever. And it's true. It's just that it's real life. It's not magic.
Well, it seems to me that there's an amplifier going on. So the question is, as we dive into what's going on at this time period, A, will we catch a break anytime soon? And B, is this, if we take big picture, is this supposed to be a slower paced year?
Speaking into, again, this idea that the last 2 years, nobody escaped the confrontations with life on life's terms that forced inner change and transformation. And this year, I do think that there is a choice, that if you are asleep and you want to go back to sleep, that's possible. I don't interact with anybody like that, right? I interact only with people who are wide awake and co-creating with the universe and doing their deep work and deep dives into change and transformation. So I suppose that for those on that path, it's a never-ending dive into the cauldrons of change and transformation. So no, we don't get a break from that perspective either. And even in this month when we really are working with tremendous creative, spiritual, and manifestation-oriented energy with Jupiter and Neptune together in the sign of Pisces, At the exact same time, Saturn, the teacher, has been squaring the nodes of the moon. So the nodes of the moon represent the collective movement of all of us away from the past and towards the future. So this entire month, while everyone's out there in meme land talking about it's magic, you can have anything you want, just dial into the manifestation mojo and create from that place. And that thread is there. So is the thread of deep lessons and delays and breakdowns that Saturn brings that cause us to process our past, square to the south node, but through difficulty and conflict and obstacle. And move forward, absolutely, north node, but through conflict, obstacle, and difficulty. Now, you and I are meeting just about a week after the Jupiter-Neptune transit was exact, but the energy is ripe all year long. And in fact, as April continues, Venus, the planet of love and intimacy and the heart center, is going to get closer and closer to Jupiter and Neptune in time for this profound new moon that's an eclipse that's going to set off May to be crazy and amplified, which you already know is going to be true for you. But we are in one of those places where, for the month of April, the astrological sort of message is, what are you going to focus on? Are you going to focus on what is possible, courtesy of Jupiter and Neptune and Venus in these manifestation placements that are outrageous and powerful? Or are you going to focus on the difficulty and the challenges, Saturn squaring the nodes? So really, it's a choice month of what you focus on will grow and increase. And if you keep your focus on what's possible to create from your heart's desires, that thread is big this month. But if you're focusing on what's breaking down, you're going to suffer.
Well, it sounds like, well, clearly it is. I'm not a big law of attraction guy anymore because I believe there's higher things going on here, but it is where you place your focus is really going to be amplified at this time. So let's go to Jupiter and Neptune, which you say is more of a longer term event than just recent times. And this is the first time we've had this conjunction, I understand, in like 166 years. What's the significance of it?
Let's start with that. The placement of planetary meetups counts. The sign that a planet is in counts. So we'll start with Neptune. Neptune is the planet through which we connect to spirit. And whether you focus on the laws of attraction or the bigger things as you're talking about, which I completely agree with you, Neptune is the astrological corollary of the co-creating spirit sensibility that we manifest with, that we manifest in co-creation with a greater energy, and that is astrologically ruled by Neptune. We call him the Great Spirit. So when Neptune moved into Pisces in 2011, that signaled a moment on the planet for a couple of decades that would be a greater possibility, would feature greater possibilities of waking people up to their spiritual awareness and aliveness. I certainly saw a difference in my own work with people, especially in the world of dreams and dream interpretation work, as Pisces is also the land of dreams and dream interpretation, therefore. Once Neptune moved into Pisces, more people were waking up. More people were more easily connecting to their spiritual nature. And I'll add this, Neptune is an outer planet, the last big body planets, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, outer sphere of planets, reflects our higher sort of spiritual consciousness. So whatever you're like, I like to use 3D, 5D, that's sort of, my shorthand for that. The outer planets are our five-dimensional self. The social planets are the planets that reflect what's happening on the globe, what's happening on Earth herself. You might even call the social planets the four-dimensional consciousness, that our 3D bodies are held by a four-dimensional body that is geometrically bigger than us and in this other dimension, but we can't know it, feel it, but we are moving in direct tandem with it. This is the same thing as taking a picture with your camera in your phone. and looking at it. That is a two-dimensional creation of your three-dimensionality. So in the same regard, there's a four-dimensional aspect of ourselves that has essentially taken its iPhone out and filmed your life. So you have a four-dimensional self that's holding your three-dimensional life in its hands. And so the social planets that help us build a world interacting with other people, which is Jupiter and Saturn, could be like our four-dimensional consciousness, the part of us that knows what we're creating from birth to death, though we can only be aware of what's happening in this present moment and we can remember the past. So that's where the social planets dwell. And so when the planet Jupiter moved into Pisces, it signaled a moment when he was going to join up with Neptune in Pisces, creating this great sort of direct line between us, the four-dimensional creative possibility, we can create anything, which Jupiter rules, and by virtue of it being in Pisces, we tap into the idea that once upon a time in astrology, Jupiter ruled Pisces. So astrologers thousands of years ago decided that this planet that represents all good fortune and expansion was best suited to rule the sign that created that there's potential for everything and anything. That's what Pisces is, the undifferentiated, non-formed consciousness through which we create the world of form. So Jupiter moving into Pisces now creates this inner band of access to this deep, spiritually driven creative force that is also pointing to the outer band of Neptune 5D. What's making April so spectacular is that Venus, the planet through which we feel the felt sense of what we desire to create, has also entered Pisces. This is a personal planet, and Venus rules the heart, which means the heart, metaphoric heart, symbolic heart, of every human on the planet in the month of April is also aligned with the Piscean possibility of everything is created through this undifferentiated field. And if you're not frightened by the void of no creation, you can heart, three-dimensional, loving, open, felt sense of what I want to create is possible, draws a line to Jupiter and Pisces, the social planet, fourth dimensional consciousness that allows me to put into the world forms that come from this heartfelt place. And then the line continues straight out to source, Neptune in Pisces, where all creation ultimately comes from in terms of the co-creation aspect of us as personal, transpersonal, the co-creator, source itself. So, oh my Lord, this alone is a juicy dip into manifestation creativity on crack. And the 166-year thing is that this is how long it takes for this alignment to happen in the sign of Pisces. Jupiter and Neptune will connect every 12 years because Jupiter has a 12-year orbit. But last time it was in Aquarius, next time it'll be in Aries, this time it's in Pisces. So, man, we've never lived through a greater moment of abundant possibility. And yes, that abundant possibility is tied right into the new moon in Taurus, also Venus ruled, lots of love in the air, that's coming at the end of the month. And so you'll see a lot of memes that say unprecedented. That's true. Once every 166 years. That's true. Power to manifest anything you desire. That's true also. But astrology meets you where you are. It can't magically change you. It can't take away the conflicts and obstacles that your journey is facing you with. That's where I get a little bit frustrated with the magical thinking quality of the memes that you see, because it'll set somebody up to feel like they're somehow fundamentally failing at life if they're still in some pain and suffering, or there's working through a wound that hasn't quite let them go, right? So the astrology is rich and ripe to be the gentlest month of the year and to allow us to create anything we desire. but within the limitations of what your life is, what you're working through, what your challenges are, and what your karma is set for this time to bring you.
And it means, thank you, Michael, we must bring our focus to bear. If our focus is all over the place at this time, heaven help us, maybe is the best way to put it.
This is always true, that what we focus on increases. That's one of the things we learn when we step onto this path. But this month is one of those months where that principle is going to show up in your body fully. Meaning, focus on what's possible. You're likely to have a little bit more gentleness from the skin in. Focus on the conflicts and the obstacles and the breakdowns and the challenges. There's lots of friction to make you feel uncomfortable in all the mess.
What does Saturn squaring the nodes, what does this have to do with anything?
Well, it tells us that we're moving forward regardless. That's the first thing we want to say when interpreting a difficult transit that involves the nodes. We start with no matter what it looks like, your life is propelling forward in the direction that is dharmic, that is fated, that is in alignment with what you've been creating your whole life. Because it's Saturn doing the connection to the nodes, now the conversation has to be about, like, what are you learning and what is the challenge that teaches you gonna be in this time? Like there has to be a lesson. And because the geometry is the geometry of conflict and obstacle, then we know we're talking about things that are designed to teach, because it's Saturn, but that are going to be presented in lessons that look like breakdowns, delays, the changing of plans that you don't prefer, the chaotic stuff that is, your life is a perfect story that represents this, Michael, right? It's like, on the one hand, it's like, baby, finally, here she comes. She's cooking in the oven. She's ready. And she's coming. But an end. You got to be in certain places to hit the right hospitals. There's a surgery. I mean, my goodness, could there be more Saturnian obstacles to this journey towards your Dharma? What are you going to focus on?
So let's bring it from there. I'm hesitant to bring it up, but it is important. You said the geometry of conflict and obstacles, and this is also a teaching moment for us. I'm looking collectively, and I like to think of collectively how we're healing, but I got to go across the pond. And I've got to go to the war that's going on there and what this means and how this is in the stars. And is there a greatest moment? I'm throwing a lot at you at once for peace.
Okay. Certainly, Saturn squaring the nodes demands that all of us reckon with what's happening on the planet at this time. And a war and reckoning with that war is certainly something we have all been having to do during this transit. And in a perfect way of reflection, the transit didn't make the war happen. The transit is simply reflecting that there's a social planet construct. Saturn and Jupiter are social planets, so it has to reflect something that's happening on the globe, is forcing us to be with the idea that very often moving away from the past towards the future includes great conflict. And so that's a reflection of us taking in that there is a war. I think we could even go back to a transit that started the year off that was geometrically more pleasant because it was a triangle, right? Trines are more gentle or flowing than squares are. But it was Pluto, the planet of change, transformation, and death and rebirth, was trining the North Node as we moved into 2022. And so if this were happening in your natal chart, I'd be like, oh my God, what a great moment where the power of change and transformation is pushing and ushering you towards your fated destiny. And I'll apply that to the world at large, but now we're talking about the complexities of the world at large, where the change and transformation at the level of death and rebirth includes some literal death, like wars and diseases and politics that look, awful, and things and violent, blah, 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 right? If I then break through out of now and into shifts that are happening later in the year, there's a summertime conjunction, meaning at the same place. Conjunction is same place, two things at the same place, of Uranus, the great awakener, and the north node of the moon. And that peak is going to have impact over the whole year, right? That's not just a July thing. That's the apex of a moment where the planet that brings the sudden, the unexpected, and the unstable, that is designed to wake us up to higher levels of consciousness, is literally, not literally, I hate using that word literally incorrectly, but I can't help myself now. I'm going to say it 6 more times before the end of this podcast, is literally pointing towards our movement forward is driven by that which is unstable and unexpected and wildcard energies. And what I like to joke about Uranus sometimes in sessions with people to really help drive this point home, that he's designed to wake us up to a higher level of consciousness, and you wake up by winning the lottery, and you wake up by losing your legs in a boating accident, because Uranus does not distinguish between those sudden, unexpected, and unstable change moments designed to wake us up. Doesn't distinguish what we would call good and bad, right? So that was another thing that we talked about at the end of last year in preparation for this year, was that because there were no planetary transits of note, we weren't responding to those kinds of changes, but that because the nodes were being transited by Pluto, then Saturn, and then Uranus, and some other players in smaller ways during the year, the big emphasis of 2022 is the world has changed, and now we have to grapple with and be pushed along with what is now happening in the world. Like, I would even say that I don't like to talk about politics and world events and astrology, but I'll say this. The war in the Ukraine wasn't a function of the astrology of this year, because this has probably been in the works for years. We're just seeing the movement of it now. That's like nodal transits in action. The 2020 and 22 geometry of planets probably reflected all sorts happening down, going down in Russia in preparation for this. Now that it's happening and we've got to be with it, that's reflected by transits that impact the nodes.
Let's fast forward from there. Let's go to the big beginning of the eclipse season. What in the world is going on there, and what does that mean for us?
Well, so we are hitting the new moon that is also our first eclipse. It's a partial solar eclipse on April 30th, right? Just in another week and a half or so. The sun and the moon will be coming together in the sign of Taurus. Taurus is Venus ruled. So that means that we're in consideration of love and sensuality and pleasure, and Taurus energy in the world of pregnancy and giving birth is the joy of skin-to-skin contact, the beauty of a body that's just been formed, behind the scenes in the oven, kind of pops out and it's like, wow, look at that. That's a Taurus thing. And wanting to touch, hold, and smell your baby is a Taurus thing, right? So, for the intention setting consciousness for your listeners, for those of you not having babies, is that we want to move into this eclipse with a strong sense of what we desire to create for ourselves that all new moons sort of, ask us to consider. But in the vein of the loving, beautiful, sensual, and joyful ways that being in a body are pleasurable, meaning, what do you want more of? What do you want more of that feels good to your experience? And because it's an eclipse, that means that the sun and the moon are near the north node of the moon. Eclipses are wildly transformative. They take this idea of a new moon in this case, and they amplify what's possible in terms of setting intentions for the longer haul. And Uranus, the great awakener, who's going to touch that north node in the summer, is part of this new moon in Taurus that happens at the end of the month. That does mean that there's a connection between intentions that get set now and summertime activations. That's possible. The movement of Venus through Pisces is exactly hanging out with Jupiter during this new moon, a partial solar eclipse. So while it's going to set up a month of amplified energy in the way that all eclipses do, there's certainly an astrological opportunity to move into May saying, all right, I've moved through the changes that January, February, March, and Venus's retrograde sort of allowed me to figure out. That's the value of Venus retrograde hanging out with Pluto. The thing that I've seen the most in terms of people's response to these last few months is more deserving, more availability for the most important part of any manifestation idea is, can you hold on to this thing you say you want? Should it show up in form because you really feel like you deserve it? And so, right, this is the classic thing about manifestation. People are like, I want cash and prizes. I want this. I want to, And it's like, yeah, but if you got that, would you keep it because you felt like you deserved it? So Venus in all her retrograding majesty from November through March, in the previous months, she's going to take that power with her for the next 2 years. Everything that Venus does for the next 2 years is going to have this deeper availability for truly deserving the things your hearts desire. The things your heart, I always get mixed up with where's the apostrophe S in that? The things my heart desires to have.
There we go.
So there we go. Right. That because Venus is participating with Neptune and Jupiter in this new moon that's also an eclipse, and the participation is connected to the nodes of the moon. So the yummy Piscean anything is possible energy that we're marinating in right now is also trining the south node, which means we're easily able to let go of the past that no longer serves us, and a 60-degree relationship with the north node, and therefore also the new moon means if we put the effort in, we can use this eclipse season to propel our desires forward with greater emphasis, faster response time from the universe, and all of that amplified and accelerated energy that every eclipse season brings.
So it sounds like, and I want to get to this very interesting Black Moon Lilith in a minute, but it sounds like this year, maybe in particular, but certainly these time periods, is we get to do the work this year. We really get to do the work because it's going to be amplified.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would imagine that the movement through 2020 and 2021 allowed us to clear out so much about what didn't serve us that we enter this year with a kind of blank slate where it really is about the personal journey. And so it is certainly my experience that I'm in a place right now in April to approach these eclipse season possibilities with a greater connection authentically to what my heart desires and a willingness to focus on that and not focus on all the ways that is difficult to achieve, and so we put in the work, you get the result. And then the total lunar eclipse, that is the full moon in Scorpio right in the middle of May, is right in alignment with the nodes of the moon. So you've got the sun in that full moon conjunct the North Node. That means it's an eclipse moment of really being able to connect consciously to where we want to go. Sun, conscious awareness, North Node, dharmic future, perfect moment of I can see where I want to go. But we have to let go to move up to a greater expression in the world, and all full moons let us release stuff. Eclipses amplify that even more because it's an eclipse. And the sign of Scorpio is the sign of death and rebirth and letting things go that have served their purpose and now can die their death. And so the moon will be right near the south node in this total lunar eclipse on May 15th. So the amplified energy is going to come from things like any new moon conjunct Uranus is going to have a wild card set up so that the whole month of May has that electricity popping and anything can happen and probably will. And that every full moon in Scorpio is going to be more intense because Scorpio is an intense energy, making an eclipse, and you can turn up the volume 6 or 8 decibels on your stereo system, right? So I'll sort of wrap it up and say this. It's such a profound moment as we move into May to really reach into the heart, which, by the way, should be wide open from Venus and Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces, to say, what do I really desire? Ground those desires into form with intentions at the new moon eclipse, and then know that what has to be taken away to have that prayer answered could be removed by the end of the month through something that might feel a little bit like a death and rebirth level of change and transformation, because that full moon takes no prisoners. And so the whole month of May, though it is amplified and potentially unstable, has profound creative mojo built into it. But if you focus on the instability and the frightening nature of life on life's terms, you will suffer. But if you focus on the love and the desires of your heart, you'll be able to use May's energy to your advantage.
I'm picturing the Disney movie Moana, and that there is really the goddess Pele is laying on her side as this volcano, fiery death and destruction, until she's given love. And then we focus on the flowering, the blooming, the possibility.
Yep, that's perfect. I almost did a spit take when you said Moana, because it's even before you use that language to describe it, it's a perfect example, right? Where there is this great power, but if it isn't well stewarded, it's destructive.
So let's go from there then to black, and what in the world is a black moon Lilith?
This is perfect for your audience and my audience, because we talk to people who are interested in, I'll just say, shadow work as a general sort of topic and tool. But anybody on the planet who is willing to look at themselves at a deep level, take responsibility for their triggers, and then be willing to dive in and say, well, what's below this? My shorthand definition of shadow work is anybody who respects the idea that any felt response in you emotionally, we're talking about the difficult ones and the triggering ones and the anger and resentments and envies and things that come up, are because there's something inside you that needs some attention. And if you look out there at the instigator of the triggered behavior, you're not doing shadow work, you're in blame, you're in victim mode, right? And the minute you look into the mirror and say, well, what's below this? And when I mean below your own consciousness, level, to say, this isn't about that person who hurt my feelings. This is about the setup inside my psyche that creates an instrument that when feelings are hurt, it's a tragedy. So that you've now got a little synopsis of my January and February where I am. Someone hurt my feelings very, very deeply in a manner that shocked me. And the work that I did after that wasn't to wrestle with what he did, but to ask myself in the mirror, what's below this in my psyche? And in January and February, I was taken to places in my childhood that blew me away. Little moments of PTSD that I didn't even know was still there, But I got to do it because I got triggered by a real life circumstance. I didn't pay attention to it in the way that most people would. I didn't go attacking the other person. I just did the work below. This is a Black Moon Lilith consciousness. So let's start with what Black Moon is. Black Moon is related to the moon, therefore it relates to what is unconscious in us, and what is unconscious is the much, much, much greater part of who we are. But it's not outside the moon's orbit. It's inside. It's in between the Earth and the moon. In fact, if you picture this, the moon does not traverse around the Earth in a perfect circle. They wobble. They pull on each other in apogee. They move toward and away from each other. And that wobble has an average. It's a calculatable mean of the wobble of the furthest and the closest that the moon and the Earth are. That's Black Moon. So from our perspective on Earth, if we were able to look up into the sky in the direction of that calculated average of the wobble, it would have a focused point that moves through the zodiac from our perspective at about 9 months to traverse a sign. So if Black Moon is about the unconscious, but not the outer greater unconscious, but the inner unconscious, now we're talking about the material that is unconscious on a Tuesday, but becomes conscious through a Wednesday, meaning you bump into something, it rears its ugly head, and you trip on it because you didn't know you felt that way until it occurred and happened. That's shadow work. That's like I got my feelings hurt, and it was like about a 3.5 on the scale, but I reacted like it was an 8 or a 9 on the scale. That's because a monster of I'm not being taken care of from my unconscious reared up. Black Moon describes that possibility. Now, I do not know why Western astrology attached Lilith to Black Moon. And I've not been able to find it, though I've looked a little bit. Lilith was the first woman in the Canaanite origin story where there was Adam and Lilith, fully sovereign, equal to Adam, instead both created by God out of clay. The Israelites had Eve, the subservient version. And for the first 800 years of the God of Abraham, they shared space with the Canaanites who were goddess worshippers, who respected the feminine. And that origin story was just as valid as the Eve one until the Jews went to Babylon and the Old Testament was, sort of codified. And those little patriarchal mothers decided to, get rid of Lilith and only go for the subservient Eve version. And look where that's gotten us. We have no ownership of the strong and powerful feminine power that is both creative and destructive. Christianity gives us the feminine principle of forgiveness and compassion through Mother Mary and alignment with other forgiveness, compassion, feminine, goddess principles like Kuan Yin. But where's the Kali? Where's the destruction? Lilith brings that. Now, the patriarchy also casts Lilith as a sort of sexual deviant. I like to think that's because now and then she wanted to be on top, and the patriarchy was like, wait, sexual sovereignty, we can't have that, right? So she was cast as a deviant. But in the essence of the archetype, that's not true at all. It's a beautiful, powerful energy that if we don't have ownership of, then where do we go for understanding the profound creative act of destruction? We put this two together, and Black Moon Lilith is a point that represents where, how, and what's the style and theme around where the most powerful integration and exploration can happen through shadow work based on where that point is traversing. And so she has just finished moving through the sign of Gemini, and was doing so while we were sort of in, the challenges of 2021, which was the aftermath, like the reckoning. And what was the biggest thing that was rising up in the shadow world last year was all the polarization. All of the divide was being felt at the personal level very, very deeply. The polarization has always been there, so it's a part of how the world works. But while Black Moon Lilith was in Gemini, I think the greatest shadow work that we were doing was driven by an exploration of ideologies, otherness, taking sides, and the stalemate that happens when oppositions cannot create a transcendent third. What happened in the last 2 weeks is Black Moon Lilith has moved into Cancer. Now it becomes a little bit more personal, a little bit more intimate with self. It's a 9-month period, so we're talking about the rest of the year and a little bit into next year, where the shadow work that we each have to do at an individual level may connect us to themes of family, themes of mothering. I love that Black Moon Lilith is going to be in Cancer while you guys are creating a family and having an experience of all of what you've been through to create this and move into, so there's a tenderness. Like, it's not all bad. Like, I hope people aren't listening to this going, uh-oh, I'm scared. I want people to listen to this and say, I know where to focus now to have the most delicious return on my investment for shadow work is if I look at the issues of vulnerability. Cancer's about vulnerability, intimacy, and how our family of origin created what we're capable of or not capable of in those intimate spaces. And the opportunity to do work on that level is really very ripe this year.
Excellent. And it brings me in a tangent where I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I am of origin Ukrainian Jew and Russian Jew coming together as one. So let's go from there in time and space. I'm going to move a little bit more quickly for the rest of the year here. What will conjunct the U.S. in August? Because the U.S. is going through a giant cycle here, and I think all world affairs, not being U.S.-centric, but this has bearing on everybody.
It's worthy of noting that anything that happens in the United States has an impact globally because we are sort of the country at the top of the heap, whether you think of that because America is great or you think of that as that America is a bully or some combination of both of those things. What's happening in the summertime that you're, I think, specifically talking about is Black Moon Lilith coming in contact with the chart of the United States of America, which has a Cancer sun. And Black Moon Lilith is crossing the Cancer placements of the USA chart for the rest of the year. And that means that the country itself is facing levels of shadow reckoning in two ways. Your audience is well aware of my conversations about the Pluto return of the United States of America. So I'll just re-up that real quick, that the chart that most astrologers use to describe the USA is July 4th, 1776. And on that date, the sun was in Cancer, 13 degrees. Oddly enough, so was the planet Venus. Venus was at 2 degrees of Cancer. Jupiter was at 5 degrees of Cancer. Sun at 13. And the retrograded Mercury, yes, the Mercury of the United States is retrograde, was at 24 degrees of Cancer. So that means that the USA has a lot of its consciousness in this sign. This is why the United States is like the mother of the world that says, come here, bring me your disenfranchised. That poem on the Statue of Liberty is a pure Cancerian nature. Even just the light in the harbor by the lady, that's a very Cancer sort of thing, saying home is this way. So the Pluto return means that we are in reckoning of the shadow of the United States? What was the great lie that the United States was built on? Was all men are created equal, which is just not true and not accurate. And that is what is coming to roost. So there's an amplification of the revelation of the underbelly of what is true and so about the United States in a real bona fide, cannot look the other way any longer sort of mode, including the people who are aligning with Make America Great Again. They're children of God, and they are having an astrological experience where their Pluto return is saying, America is this, and we've got to return it to that. Even if I think that's not accurate, that person has got that truth to them. And the people on the other side that's saying America is, more in alignment with what I think it is, are also right. Everybody's right. Everybody gets to be right. But the shadow of it is undeniable, which means that right or not, we're bumping into, we cannot deny the truth of what America is, whatever that means to anybody, because we've got this simultaneous Pluto return of the United States with the shadow exploration of you're going to trip on this whether you like it or not, moving through Cancer starting this month, meaning the whole rest of the year has some challenges perhaps for all of us in the United States, for the United States itself, trying to find its way while the covers have been pulled.
So let's go from covers. We've got just a little bit of time left. Anything else we want to look at for the summer? And then we'll kind of do a quick deep dive through the fall and anything that can either trip us up or bring us up.
Well, I'll say this about summertime, and just let's talk a little about some good news energy, is that the Jupiter, while we would, I would love it if Jupiter retrograded in Pisces and stayed there for a long time. He didn't. He won't. He's zipping through Pisces. And when we get to around the second week of May, he leaves Pisces and enters Aries. And he'll stay there for a while and retrograde there for a while, right? So that means that from May through the early months of 2023, our manifestation energy is in the cardinal sign that says we start things up, right? Jupiter in Pisces is exalted and allows us to connect to manifestation possibility, but it's still Pisces, which is the undifferentiated form sign. So anything that we're marinating in during these early months of 2021 about what we want to create gets a thrust of startup energy just next month, and the entire rest of the year has the planet of expansion, abundance, and prosperity in the cardinal fire sign that allows us to really make some tangible movement occur from the desires that we have. So in terms of pure manifestation, May on has more fire built into it.
So if I'm looking, for instance, to build out additional channels for our Inspire Nation audience, I am coming up with them internally now in this month, but in May is the time to functionally build them out.
Absolutely. In fact, I would say that in the perfect way that astrology reflects things, not causes things, that while Jupiter's in the sign of the undifferentiated form, you're in the undifferentiated form process of planning and thinking and wondering and trying and figuring out. And yes, once we get to the middle of May and beyond, you've got some real fire behind launching. It's a great launch energy of anything from May on. I would say that from October through December, Jupiter is going to have backtracked into the last degree or two of Pisces. And so you could have an autumn kind of inhibition about movement. But from May through October, have at it. And from December on, have at it.
Perfect. Anything else for the summer before we go into the fall? I think we cover July and Uranus?
Yes, we talked about July and Uranus. Just understand that in terms of facing the world and what it's doing, summertime is going to be potentially unstable and dicey. Anything is possible. I want to make sure that we all understand that this is both personal and transpersonal, meaning each of us in our journeys can use these nodal moments to push our own desires and agenda forward, but it also reflects a likelihood that if there's challenges out in the world that feel unstable, summertime is going to be the peak of some of that instability, which could certainly reflect in things that happen both, politically in the United States and the war in Ukraine and everything else that's going on. So yes, from that perspective, summer has some dicey possibilities that we will all have to be, taking in and accepting the things that are like, wow, didn't see that coming, or, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. When Uranus is in the house, anything is possible.
Let's go real briefly. Retrogrades, we've got Mercury, we've got Mars. What in the world's going on?
Well, we have our standard Mercury retrogrades that we have like every year. So we're still in the free and clear period with Mercury for like the next minute or so. But right at the end of this month, he starts his shadow for the next retrograde, right? So the middle of May through early June is our next retrograde, Gemini to Taurus. So any retrograde by Mercury that's in one of his ruling signs is more chaotic than another sign, right? And especially Gemini, right? So there's a lot of overthinking, a lot of, too many thoughts and words and conversations and challenges. And it makes eclipse season a little bit more challenging because the energy is already amplified from eclipse wormhole energy. And we have the retrograde sort of to throw a little bit of wrench in the works. The next retrograde of Mercury's is early September through early October. Also an air sign, but not ruled by Mercury. This is going to be more about Libra energy, which is, about our relationships and our mirrored reflection. And so you can certainly expect mental challenges in the month of September. It's Mars's retrograde that's interesting to talk about because they're rare. Venus retrogrades are rare. We happen to have had one in 2021 and in 2022, and that's rare to have two so close to each other. Mars and Venus tend to retrograde about every 2 years-ish, and they're harder to sort of present how they're going to impact us because Mars is about action, choices, and decisions. And that becomes something that will be very different person to person to person based on where they're at in terms of, their willingness to take risk and to act in new and different ways. A Mercury retrograde is easy to talk about because everybody thinks and everybody communicates. And you can just say, thinking and communication is going to be challenged, and everybody gets that. Similarly, Venus retrogrades are about feelings and connection and love and intimacy, and everybody sort of has a clear idea of that process. And so a Venus retrograde is about reorganizing how you work with your emotional body. Mars is about the body itself and actions and decisions. So everyone's going to experience this differently. The sign that Mars retrograde is in will count, right? It's Gemini. So that means it is about aligning our walk and our talk, because Gemini is the sign of the talk. Mars is the planet of the walk. And so that's one thing to consider about what might be coming up for people during the Mars retrograde is an opportunity to turn within, to consider the goals, the projects, the intentionality that connect directly to actions you might have to take. Will be reviewed, potentially reworked, because that's what a retrograde does. But because it's in Gemini, it's going to be about how you speak into such things. And the shorthand is aligning your walk and your talk.
Thank you. Last things for the year. Do we second eclipse season? Is that super important, or what do we get to look for?
Well, I mean, all eclipse seasons are important because they're transformative. Every new moon is an intention setting moment, and every full moon is a release moment. But when they are eclipses, the stakes are higher. I think in terms of just energetic challenges, because that's what everybody kind of wants to know, is like, how hard is it going to be and when, right? The fact that Mars's retrograde shadow begins early September through late October. That means that we're in preparation during September and all of October to sort of look at projects, goals, choices, and actions that are going to come up for review will be revealed to us during that time of the shadow, all of September, all of October. Then he turns around on October 30th, and we will be in that retrograde for the rest of the year. He doesn't go direct again until January, right? So that means that November and December have bumping into the furniture like on crack, because the planet that moves our bodies around space is going to be busy on the inside of our psyche trying to figure out what we want to do with our goals and aspiration energy. And the eclipse season is right in that late October, early November period. So just as we are amplified by the eclipse, we've got Mars turning retrograde, which will make the end of the year a bit of a cluster energetically. And, I can't say a whole lot more about that because we're not there yet, right? Part of how I am good at what I do with astrology is by combining what I know with what I feel. And we're just not quite there yet, but I can tell you that the combination of Mars in retrograde while we're in eclipse season is certainly going to make October, November, and December bumpy months.
Where does Pluto? So we've got Pluto. We've already passed on Pluto. We've got July 11th Pluto. We've got December 28th Pluto. What does this have to do with the bumpiness?
Well, it does mean that the Pluto return energy of the United States, that is part of how all of us are kind of vibrationally responding to the world's challenge, will finish the year along with a Mars retrograde and an eclipse season and the final hit of something that will clearly rise up more American world connection challenges. And we have our midterm elections. I mean, I hate to end this on that note, but it is accurate that election time in 2022 is going to be, you don't need an astrologer to tell you that. Oh my God, really? No, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but we say it because it's here, and we should add that too, that how the United States goes, the world goes. That's just something about how the global sort of, psyche is structured. And we're in some trouble. And in terms of the year, the emphasis of the trouble is greater in that last hit of the Pluto return, greater than the February one, greater than the one in the middle of the year. The final hit of the Pluto return of the United States comes at the same time as eclipses in Mars retrograde. And by the way, the Mars in the USA chart is in Gemini, which is where Mars is going retrograde. That makes it a deeper, more powerful retrograde for the United States. Right? In fact, I like to talk about if Mars represents the body in a natal chart, then Mars in a chart for a country represents the bodies that inhabit it, the population, and it's us who are polarized. So there will be, certainly from a consciousness perspective, there will be the opportunity to go within at the individual level and say, how can I heal the polarization in myself so that I can be in a world where I hear a differing idea being expressed by someone on the other side of what I believe and not want to kill them? That's my desire. I mean, the only murderous rage I ever feel is when I hear certain senators say certain things. And I feel that in me, which I would like to feel less of. A Mars retrograde in Gemini can help us go internal and process how we work with our aggression and our assertiveness and our angers, and find ways to balance and harmonize on an inner level, so that we can be in the outer world more graceful while in the face of polarizing sort of challenge. Although I think it's going to be a very difficult few months for all of us to maintain a level of peace and serenity while also watching a world going mad.
Last couple things on that beautiful note. Where can people go to find out more and find your daily Astro Alert?
Everything is available at michaellennox.com. In fact, I would recommend that if people are interested in what I do, go to michaellennox.com, join my newsletter, which just means you'll be getting my full moon reports, my new moon reports, my monthly forecasts, and all of my announcements, which include classes. I teach classes. You can find that at the website. And yes, my daily astro alerts are there. You can find all about getting daily guidance from me via email, michaellennox.com.
Beautiful. And I again, I am afraid to ask because I really wanted to leave people on a positive note. But Michael, is this the calmer of the years to come?
In some ways, yeah, I'd have to say yes. I think that when the various listen, you want to end on a happy, positive note, and
yes.
I'm going to have to say the positive is I think we got this, but that is in understanding that what we have to do is mighty, mighty work. And as Pluto changes signs and Neptune changes signs and Uranus changes signs in 24 and 25 and 26, I think that we're in for some big world challenges. And so what I would say to your listening audience, rather than say, yes, it's going to be fine, we're going to get out of this, is like, no, our job is to go within, to become spiritual warriors so that we can know who we are profoundly, know what we're here to bring and give and serve, do that, and live lives of service, even if the world is going mad.
My guess is if we do that, we actually ground and help the world as it appears to be falling apart to fall apart to a higher level.
Couldn't agree more.
So thank you so much, Michael. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun. This is the year to dive in. This is the month to dive in. This is the time to dive in. Get the daily Astro Alert, and above and beyond all else, shine bright. Woohoo! What a beautiful, albeit a bit harrowing, I don't know if prediction is the right word. We'll call it reading. This was really a profound reading for the rest of the year ahead. What a beautiful and profound reading for the year ahead from Dr. Michael Lennox. And if we called it a prophecy, it's a prophecy that requires us to dive into the inner work. On that note, if you want to dive in, then get automatic writing. Go to automaticwriting.com and learn how to dive in and communicate with spirit. Arguably, for your life, for my life, for baby Hannah on the way, this time period more than ever requires us to ground, requires us to communicate with spirit, and literally to become the modern mystics we were meant to be. So come to automaticwriting.com to begin learning automatic writing today. Go to inspirenationuniversity.com to become the mystic you were meant to be through our School of Mystics. On that note, click the subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified of upcoming shows, YouTube premieres, live events with me every Monday night. So much behind the scenes goodness now with our Mystic Circle. We've got behind the scenes meditations. We've got explanations. We've got me. We've got Rue. We've got Jessica, looking at how we're navigating the world and giving you suggestions on how you can navigate it as well. Just click the join button down below to become a member of our Mystic Circle. Remember, we're a podcast. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Spotify, and anywhere you listen to your podcast for when you're running, riding a bike, driving down the road, or whatever it is. Love you guys so much. Here's a link to the next amazing video. See you guys again soon. Keep on shining bright. Woohoo! Love you guys. How does it get any better than this? How does it get any better than this?